Welcome back to another episode of Real Talk. I'm Carlos Gil. We are at the NASDAQ market site in New York City, Times Square. We have two special guests joining us today on the set. One is Mario Armstrong, who's an Emmy Award-winning creator and producer of the show Never Settle Show, as well as Kerry Flynn, who's a marketing reporter for Digiday. First segment, I'm going to speak with Kerry on all things social media trends, what's happening, where we're going, and more importantly, how you can stand out on social media. Kerry, welcome back to Real Talk.
Thanks for having me back. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it is great to have you. Now, I've been keeping up with your insights over on Digiday. Most recently, you wrote an article on Instagram stories. Tell us a little bit about what's happening in the world of Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah, so I'm sure everyone's pretty familiar with Instagram stories. It's been on Instagram for a while now. What's interesting to see is now it becoming an advertising machine. So we know Facebook, there are ads everywhere. Instagram feed, lots of ads. Now they're in stories. And so what I recently wrote about is now for those advertisers, they can go into their ads manager dashboard and it's simply checking a box to have an ad appear on Facebook feed, Instagram feed, and now Instagram stories. And that's super great for advertisers. It just makes it so much easier. And it's great for Facebook, right? They're having more people test and explore. Because us consumers, we know how great Instagram stories is. I still don't use Instagram, but I know other people do, and stories is a great way to use the platform every day. And now advertisers will be able to take advantage of that and not feel like it's so much pressure to create the ad. And maybe what's the brilliant thing about Facebook's advertising system is they're able to, you run this campaign and they're like, okay, this is performing super well on Instagram stories. You're finding your audience there. Or maybe it's not. And the system, machines will magically put more ads if it's doing well or less if it's not.
Now, it's interesting that you bring up the integration of Instagram stories advertising in the Facebook ads platform, because it's no secret Facebook has gone through over the last year with Cambridge Analytica. They've been under fire. Yeah. However, marketers and advertisers are still all about Big Blue. Yeah. However, it seems like Facebook is going away from its core. I'm talking about Facebook.com. In that same article that you wrote, there was an analyst that predicted that Facebook will dwarf itself within the next 10 years. Maybe you can speak to and elaborate, more importantly, on what exactly they mean by that statement.
Yeah, that analyst who I spoke to over the story, Rich Greenfield, he's wonderful. He's an analyst at BTIG. He keeps close eye on all the social platforms. And his take from, I spoke with him shortly after Facebook's last earnings report, was, you know, we're both listening to the CEO of Mark Zuckerberg, and he's painting this future of Facebook. And one of Rich's main takeaways is that, like, it seems like Instagram is like this giant. We know it's a giant. We know there are so many people using it, but perhaps it's going to become in the future even more important than, like you said, Facebook.com. Like, sure, as I was walking off the subway here, I saw the guy next to me. He had to be probably in his 50s, looking at Facebook, checking his notifications. But if I'm on the subway and I'm surrounded by people my age or in their 30s, they're on Instagram. So it's obvious that, like, where the audience is the younger audience, who is going to become even more valuable when they become older and make more money. If they're on Instagram, then, like, maybe that Facebook app is no longer the big thing.
Now, I gotta stop you there because you mentioned a couple key points, and I'm with you. I fly a lot, so I spend a lot of time in airports, and I do the same thing. I observe what platforms are people using when they're waiting for their flight. They're either on Snapchat, which I know you're a big fan of, or they're on Instagram, and they're using these apps primarily for messaging, more so than they are to consume or to even create content. Yeah. So why wouldn't Facebook invest more resources into making Messenger its own robust experience versus taking features that have worked for Snapchat or have worked for Instagram and import them over to Facebook?
Yeah, they are testing with Messenger, and I think they you know, Facebook and knows way more than we do about how much people are using Messenger. So they can see all those Instagram DMs happening, and they've been testing breaking it out into a separate app too. I think that was last year. They have one internally that's just Instagram DMs, but they haven't folded it out because they still want that core experience, and I think they haven't exactly nailed the good and bad of it. As you know, Facebook Messenger is a separate app, right? So that, and they've kind of made changes where, like, they filled it with a bunch of features and only last month they decided to trim it down. So Facebook is trying a lot right now, right? So I think they know the power of DMs. but they want that to be a part of the core experience. They want maybe you see something on your Instagram feed and then you send it to your friend, right? It's like a holistic experience. Now with IGTV, which again, very new, that's another element that has the Instagram branding on it. So they kind of have all sides of the coin when it comes to communication and media.
I completely agree, but going back to a previous point where Facebook is trying to hook, if you will, the older millennials to stay on the platform as they, let's just say, graduate from an Instagram to then go over to making Facebook their go-to social network. Do you feel that that is a right strategy? Because I know, like in the brand world, for example, where I come from, you send any advertising or any marketing meeting, and there's this perception of like, we have to be here right now to hook people now, because when they grow up, they're still going to be our customer. And I call BS on that. Like, we don't know if these platforms are going to still exist in 5 years or 10 years. Like, you look at the way of AOL and MySpace, and you could go on and on, Vine, like we could like just dig up,
RIP.
you know, RIP of all these social networks that have been buried. Like I'm a big believer that there's so much social media saturation that the average consumer just can't keep up.
Yeah.
But yet when you start piling all these platforms and features, like you mentioned IGTV, with this hope of like, if we hook someone today, they're going to be our customer 5 or 10 years from now.
Yeah.
I personally think that's unrealistic, and instead brands should be marketing in the now, get as much juice out of the squeeze, as I say, get it now versus thinking about what's going to happen 5 or 10 years from now.
Yeah, it's interesting perspective. I think you were saying this earlier about like Facebook essentially cannibalizing itself, right? And we saw them buy Instagram when like Facebook had the capability to be a photo sharing app, right? That's what Facebook really was known for a while. They buy this photo sharing app and everyone's like, what? Like you spent $1 billion on a photo sharing app? You have that feature. Look what happened, right? So like, I think they're smart with all their strategy of like, some people are gonna like Instagram, some people are gonna like Facebook, some people are gonna like WhatsApp, you know? Like, so there's that whole holistic perspective. And to your point, when it comes to consumers and when it comes to brands and people who only have so much time and so much money, it's up to them to really strategize. And I think that's, to my point earlier, what's interesting about Facebook is they're making it easier to understand where you should be. Because to the point of like, let's say I'm a brand and I have $100 on it to spend, and I put it, and now I can check boxes that say, okay, Facebook, you decide where my $100 should go. And maybe because of the brand that I am, my $100 are on Instagram completely.
You see, as a marketer, I'm going to push back on that. I'm less concerned about how I can advertise on these mediums. I'm more concerned about, are people truly even paying attention on these mediums? First of all, like, you can swipe a credit card and you can get reach, but are people truly paying attention? And I feel, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this, that Facebook is getting in its own way. So when I read that you write an article that an analyst is saying that Facebook might be dwarfed in 10 years, it completely makes sense.
Totally.
Think about it. You're adding all these new features. You are building features within these social networks like IGTV. I just saw on my notifications today that they have a new Instagram DM app. I'm not sure if that just dropped or that's been there for a while, but you have all these new features. It's hard for people to keep up. So what are your thoughts? Is Facebook standing its own way? Are they just like getting away from what once made them great to now just being average?
I think, again, to cite Zuckerberg in his latest like call, he kind of says it's to each their own, right? Like where there are people who maybe their audience is on Facebook, you know, like there are people who appeal to perhaps an older generation, and they're seeing that they're getting a lot of engagement in the comments and getting a lot of shares. But then there are the people on Instagram, right? So it's up to you to evaluate your success. Obviously, I think as we talked about last time, just because you have X number of likes and shares doesn't actually mean anything to this day. You actually have to see who these people are. And again, Facebook gives you those resources.
I refer to those likes and followers as a qualified audience.
Yeah.
So there's another article. I'm going to go ahead and read the title here. It came from one of your colleagues over at Digiday. The title is Shows for Nobody. Facebook Watch has moved away from early short-form video formats. Speak to that.
Yeah, Facebook Watch has always been an interesting play. I remember when it came out, I was at my last job, Mashable, and we had Facebook Watch shows because Mashable like is one of those brands that tries to be really ahead of the game and has a huge audience on Facebook. So why not create videos that maybe could have been on YouTube for this new platform? Now, over a year later, people look back and they're like, why did we do that? What is this platform even for? They've had some success on Facebook Watch. I think, I'm biased, I'm a huge Patriots fan. Tom versus Time, they had a whole show about Tom Brady. It did pretty well. And the interesting thing about that is shows for nobody.
Right.
Tom versus Time wasn't a show for nobody.
Right.
They appealed directly to Tom Brady fans like me. And the reason why that's powerful is because they know who's a Tom Brady fan, because 10 years ago, I listed the Patriots as my favorite sports team on Facebook. So that's not a show for nobody, but the issue that my colleague wrote about is there were, not to belittle my like former employer, but there were brands who were like, yeah, let's do it, let's put a show. And they were like, what? But like, who is it for, right? And the distribution wasn't there. And really in the end, people weren't clicking in, they didn't see it as a video platform, where YouTube, you know, where other publishers do put their content, it makes sense. So now, over a year later, you have publishers really thinking about their strategy, when before it was like, oh yeah, of course we'll do it.
You see, I look at it from the lens of, we're creating a production right here. This show is on Facebook Watch, but we also have a partnership with Entrepreneur, so we're part of the Entrepreneur Network. From my home on Apple TV, I can pull up the Entrepreneur Network app, I can also pull up YouTube, and I can watch this episode on my television. I can't do that yet with Facebook Watch.
Yeah. I think one thing that's interesting about, and I think you've actually experimented with this, is Watch Party. So one thing they're trying to push, and Zuckerberg said this again on his latest call, that he acknowledged that YouTube is their biggest competitor when it comes to video. And what's interesting is YouTube hasn't really nailed down the experience of social watching. Like you and I are watching something together and it's fun and great. Really, no one has nailed that down except Twitter, but not really, right? We'll talk about that later. But like, if Facebook can really make it so I want to watch something with my friends and communicate about it in real time, like that's something that YouTube doesn't have at all. So maybe that's something that they're going to double down on next year.
So going back to when you were watching the Tom Brady series, the original content on Facebook Watch, let me ask you a couple questions. How long were these episodes?
I think they were between 10 and 20 minutes.
So about 10 and 20 minutes,
longer.
and were you consuming this content exclusively on your cell phone? Or were you watching it on a desktop?
I watched it on my desktop.
Okay.
Yeah, which was a pretty good experience, right? It was very easy to watch. I think one thing, I actually haven't read the story, but I saw the headline yesterday that some outlet analyzed Major League Baseball on Facebook, because it's been a success story for them. As you guys probably well know, like baseball has kind of been declining in numbers of viewers on television. And what's interesting, but it's there on Facebook Watch, and it's for free. Right? So, and it's so easy to watch. Maybe I'm at work, or maybe I'm commuting, and I can easily pull out my desktop or be on my phone and watch a baseball game in real time. That's great. That's an awesome experience. And same thing for me, like I can just pull up the Tom Brady show while I'm doing something else, and it's so easy to watch. It's an interesting form.
So, you know, once again, going back to it, and we're going to have Mario Armstrong here on the set next, and then we're going to bring you guys together because I want to hear both of your thoughts. You know, the creator and producer, the reporter that's kind of in the weeds, learning directly from Facebook. But one thing that was really interesting recently was Social Media Examiner, which produces Social Media Marketing World. It's no secret that the largest conference for social media marketers out there. They made this revelation that they're going off of Facebook in terms of producing shows on Facebook, and they're going back to short form content, and they are going to start putting all of their longer form video content on YouTube. Even an example, what we do here with the Real Talk, we chop up our segments, we put the entire episode on Facebook Watch, and then a couple days later, you'll watch, you know, no pun intended, the one-on-one interviews, you got the 60-second videos over on Instagram, you've got the swipe up on Instagram stories. Like, we're chopping, wheeling and dealing and dicing to get as many eyeballs, at least on a piece of content, to drive people back to the main source. So whether it's myself, Mario, any other content creator out there, based on the information that you know of working with Facebook and covering Facebook, should we be putting like all of our eggs in this basket here, or should we be diversifying and putting our shows and our longer form video content somewhere else?
I think it's interesting. I've talked with creators who, when Watch started, and later on, Facebook kind of seeked out a bunch of creators to be Facebook first people. I wrote about that ahead of VidCon, and there are people who are thriving on the platform. I see these creators every day in my feed, so clearly they're getting attention. But as you well know, it's hard to break through the Facebook feed, right? And people aren't used to searching at the top for videos. They're used to that on YouTube.
Right.
So the algorithm is divided on Facebook because it's trying to show you articles and photos and videos, while YouTube, its algorithm is pretty smart when it comes to video. So I would never suggest put your eggs in one basket unless it's super successful for you, and maybe you should put a lot of your budget there. I was talking, other platform, was just talking to a publisher yesterday about their Snapchat strategy, and his brand is investing a lot in Snapchat because they're finding so much success in it, and that Snapchat pays up, and they're able to make money and find audience. But that's not right for everyone, right? So like, And at the same time, if Snapchat dies tomorrow, they still have their intellectual property. They still have the rights to the content, and hopefully
And
they
how
can
sad
put it
would you
elsewhere.
be?
I would probably cry, but but no, I'm just saying that like there's easy answer is like it depends, right? Like as in there are really thriving people on Facebook Watch, and then there are thriving people on Snapchat. At the same time, I think there's no question. I don't think Zuckerberg denies this. YouTube is king.
So very easy yes or no answer. Should we, the creators, be thinking of these mediums as the way we would think of traditional TV?
Interesting question. Well, it depends.
I'm gonna put you on the spot.
What are you talking about with traditional?
What I'm talking about is the actual production.
Oh,
30 to 45 minutes of content in one fell swoop, like real talk.
Yeah.
Like Lewis House, for example, has a successful show on Facebook Watch. Or should we be thinking of micro moments?
I think
Going back to like Snapchat's strategy of like 2 to 3 minutes
Yeah.
worth of content tells your story for one episode.
I think it depends. Again, easy answer, it depends. One thing that's been frustrating when I watch Facebook Watch content, the rare times that I do, is the ads are super interruptive because the storytellers aren't making it for the ads. One thing that's amazing about television for the actual on television versus Netflix is the story is built around ad breaks, So like the first 5 minutes and then there's a suspenseful moment. You got to watch the commercials, but you come back. You'll just be watching something on Facebook Watch and then an ad just appears and it totally ruins the storytelling. So if you're a Facebook Watch creator that's monetizing on the platform, you've got to keep that in mind. You're going to be like, okay, maybe I'm going to tell a 10-minute story. I got to remember that an ad's going to show up at the 2-minute mark. And if I don't do a good job reaching up to that point, I'm going to lose everyone.
Right. Enough with Facebook. Let's transition over to Twitter because I think we've hit that nail on the head. So Facebook is going to continue to I don't know if improve is the right term, but they're going to continue to make changes to their platform. We'll continue to talk about it as marketers, and life will continue to move on. Now, Twitter, you recently wrote an article. I'm going to read the title here. How Twitter is testing ways to improve conversation. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carrie. Hasn't Twitter always been a platform that's conversation first?
Yeah, I think we converse on Twitter. So yes, I would agree. I DM people all the time. I talk to people all the time. It's interesting. I guess the headline is, I wouldn't say it's misleading. I'm saying it's interesting because they're trying to really expand that. They know that Twitter is a conversation medium. At the same time, it's kind of become a broadcast thing, right? For publishers that use the platform, they're like breaking news, right? Like here's this, but they want to highlight the fact that it's not just breaking news, here's this. It's like, oh, let's go back to a football example, right? Like breaking news, the Patriots just won. But I don't just want to know the Patriots just won. I want to know, what did Tom Brady say, right? And that's the power of Twitter, is that because all these people, not just the players, but the sports analysts, the fans, use it as a platform to share their feedback for whatever the news is. And Twitter wants to highlight that because right now and for the past, it just hasn't been that easy to find that. I would have to search for Tom Brady or search for my favorite sports reporter rather than it being brought to the forefront.
Would you say that we're going back to the basics, so to speak? So a couple of years ago, live video was like the hottest thing that we've ever seen on social media.
Yeah.
It was live video. You have to do a live video. You have to go live. And then it started becoming short micro content video, shorter form video. Like that was a trend. Are we just going back to the basics? Whether it's Twitter, Facebook, everywhere else, Pinterest.
Totally. I mean, it's interesting to your point, like Twitter did so much live video, right? They got rights to, going back to football, I feel like I'm only talking about football, but they got rights to the NFL, Thursday Night Football. That was huge. And they were like, yes, videos, everything on Twitter. There's still video on Twitter. But I agree, they are getting back to the basics of making sure that the beauty of the platform is real-time conversation. Again, and just being the news. Their whole slogan now, what's happening? What's happening isn't just live video, right? But live video is great. What's happening is conversation, real-time conversation.
Right. I'll share with you, Twitter is the platform where I perhaps am the most active. And what I enjoy about Twitter is I don't have to follow you or you follow me in order for us to have a conversation, in order for us to build a relationship. If I see that you tweet something that's of interest to me, I can just swoop in.
Yeah,
I can give you my thoughts. I can network with you.
Yeah.
And I see there's tremendous amount of value in that, whereas on the other social networks, it feels at times a little spammy. Like you're sliding in someone's DMs, you're sliding their conversation when you weren't necessarily given a seat at the table, whereas Twitter, it's open source. You can search topics of interest, you can go into those conversations. So I personally like the fact that Twitter is making that move back to what's made them a prominent social network over the years.
Totally, yeah, and the specifics of what that story was about now is the example of what you just shared. They're trying to make it easier to join the conversation. So let's, for example, we follow each other. You see a conversation that maybe got like super value. Maybe I didn't start the conversation, but I replied to it. So Twitter is going to highlight, because it knows that you follow me, it's going to highlight my response. You're like, oh, Carrie responded this, why? And maybe then you'll see someone else you know responded, and you'll be able to easily see the conversation from the people that maybe you care most about, rather than random people everywhere. They're not going to make those disappear, but they're going to highlight things that maybe could matter to you and are going to make you want to respond and jump in and be able to understand what you can say.
Yeah. Carrie, on a closing note, before we bring Mario on the set, it's almost 2019.
Yeah.
What's one prediction that you're going to stick to when it comes to social media marketing trends?
Social media marketing trends. So I guess excitingly, I was just at a conference yesterday called Mixed Reality Marketing Summit. Mixed reality means augmented reality and virtual reality, kind of the world that's not just the screen of your phone or the screen of TV. We've already seen a lot of that, right? My favorite platform, Snapchat, was kind of one of the leaders in making AR, augmented reality, mainstream, because you're making the puppy filter and you're doing other world lenses. I think we're going to see more of that on Instagram and Facebook and elsewhere, other platforms, maybe web-based platforms as well. So there's already been a lot of augmented reality, but I'm excited for more of that in 2019.
We're already seeing AR over on Snapchat. We're seeing 3D photos, which I know also was recently covered in Digiday on Facebook.
Totally. Like,
so the
more
next
engaging
step is we start taking the iPhones and we're wearing them on our faces, and that's called Oculus, which already exists.
It's that. I think maybe less VR, more AR in 2019.
Okay. Carrie Flynn, as always, thank you so much. Where can the viewers out there connect with you?
Carrie M. Flynn on all platforms, including Snapchat.
Including Snapchat. Carrie, thank you so much. We're going to ask you to stick around, and then we're going to bring Mario Armstrong on the set. So once again, thank you for joining me here on Real Talk. All right, in our next segment, we are going to get to know an Emmy Award-winning producer and the host of Never Settle Show, Mr. Mario Armstrong. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Real Talk here at the NASDAQ market site in New York. Now, if you've ever thought about creating your own show and you've wondered how to create an award-winning show, this next segment and this next guest that we're going to bring on is going to talk about his claim to fame, and his name is none other than Mr. Mario Armstrong. Mario.
So, Carlos
Welcome to Real Talk.
in the flesh. So good to be here with you.
It is a pleasure to connect with you.
Likewise.
My friend.
Honestly, because I've been following you for a long time.
Yeah, I've been following you. I love your energy. I love your story.
Ditto.
We have a lot that we relate to.
It's true.
Each other, and I've got to be honest with you, doing what I do here in this studio, which is where you create your show as well, it's been an inspiration and motivation for myself.
Really?
So yes, and I wanted to let you know that face to face. So thank you, my brother, for everything that you do.
You know, you don't know who's watching what and how you're impacting who, right? And I often think about the bigger impact that we're trying to have. The whole idea of the Never Settle Show is to create the opportunity for people to not settle in their life. So what we want, just by extension of doing the show, is for more people to be able to see opportunity for themselves. So when I hear that, I never take it for granted. So I appreciate hearing that.
You know, so we're gonna get into Never Settle Show. Obviously, you've won an Emmy. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
But let's talk about Mario Armstrong in terms of who you were before the Emmy, who you were before Never Settle, because there's this word called story that keeps cropping up. A couple of episodes ago, we had Gerard Adams right here on the set, and we spent a lot of time talking about the importance of your story. And it seems like in the last 30 days, everyone that I link up with in business meetings, in media interviews, like that word story keeps just coming up to the surface. Like people care less about your product, they care less about your offer, and they care more about who you are as a person.
Yeah.
I know you've been on the Today Show, you still are your correspondent for them.
That's right.
You've won an Emmy, you work here with NASDAQ as well, but like who is Mario Armstrong?
So that's a great question. I think if you peel back the layers and you go back, growing up in Baltimore City is where I grew up, so shout out to Baltimore. And you know, watching your role models and mentors, in those days it was my parents, family members, extended family members, and just watching how they move and how they communicate. And my uncle had this mantra early on that I was taught, like at the age of 10. It was like, you know, always deliver, say what you mean what you say, and always deliver more than you promise. And it was like hearing those things, you know, my other uncle would say to me, this ain't no playground. Like just hearing those things and then watching my dad pursue his dream of creating a record company that was trying to compete with a Motown. He's doing this in Baltimore. Like the chances of this happening is, you know, nil. And he was able to take a group and go around the country and go around the world and tour, but they never had that one single that really popped that he could create that Motown. But watching him go after that dream and then seeing how he had to deal with like transitioning from that not working and going bankrupt and filing for that, but watching how he picked himself back up. So I think all those pieces became this resiliency and this idea that as long as you put in the work and as long as you're good to people along the way, and as long as you mean what you say and you say what you mean and you deliver more than you promise, you're going to be fine. But it has to start like that's the foundation.
And that's all about your character.
Correct.
Having a character that people want to bring in, having a character that people want to be around, and really having a character where you show up for others.
Yeah, it's true. And at the time, you're too young to really understand what all this can mean later. But you just
like as a kid, you hear from your parents. Sorry to interrupt. Like,
no.
Be a good person when you grow up. Like, be a good kid.
Right.
Listen to your elders. Be respectful.
Yeah. Do the work. Trust me. It'll pay off later. What? Get out of here. You know?
Right.
So yeah, I was the same kid that grew up with the same questioning of my parents in the same way. But my dad and mom also, they threw books at me. So they would throw Tony Robbins books, they threw Dale Carnegie books. Like I would read like some of these books and I would get into it. I'm starting to highlight and dog-ear pages. And so at a very early age, the idea of personal growth, personal development, and that you can shape your own opportunities was real to me. Like that wasn't something that to fix broken people that they need personal development or personal growth because they're broken. That this is actually a path you can choose to take, that you can have this mindset and it can make a difference.
Right. So to kind of peel back layers of the onion a bit, you mentioned Tony Robbins, Dale Carnegie. These were books that you read growing up.
Yeah.
And, you know, to point it out, both you and I are men of color. I'm Hispanic. You're African American.
Right.
Who did you relate to? Like, who was it that you looked up to? And I just ask you that because I grew up in the 80s and 90s in South Florida. I'm of Cuban heritage.
Right.
And there wasn't those figures necessarily. Like, there was Don Francisco that was, you know, like the figure in media that we would look up to. And he was a talk show host, but there wasn't necessarily that motivational speaker. And then like as I started coming up and evolving and became, you know, I grew up from an adolescent to an adult. Yeah. Then I started consuming the Tony Robbins. But like as a kid, it was my mom and dad that motivated.
Right.
So like for you, like who was that driving force? Was it those Tony Robbins and Dale Carnegie that you aspired to get on that level? Or was there someone in your community? Was there someone in your family that you said like, I want to be more like this person?
Yeah, I would say that it really wasn't any one individual in particular. I can think of people like Les Brown, who comes to mind, which is a motivational speaker that is African American that led the way. I can think of Oprah for sure, was like a role model that I saw early on, that there's something different here, especially in the time that she was coming up in the talk show era, which is something that appealed to me, having a talk show, doing a talk show. And watching Phil Donahue and all of them, I'm dating myself a little bit going back there, but you know, I'm really thinking at a young age, what was I watching and why, and how was that making an impression on me? And so I think my parents, understanding that as I started putting through action, I would see results, and understanding that, wait, this whole idea that you can create opportunity is real. You don't have to just visit your neighborhood in the 4 blocks that you're used to going to. Hop on your bike and go be dangerous. Go be curious and go expose yourself beyond what you're comfortable with. And I think all those things were starting. When I did that, I got new friends. New friends put me into new exposure, that put me into more different surroundings. And so I started finding myself being around amongst different types of people. And I think all of that gave me 3 things as a kid that I started really latching onto. 1, curiosity rocks. Like, the fact that I would always ask questions would probably bother the heck out of most people, but it was the fact that I was asking questions that was actually helping me learn more about other people in other communities. So I think as adults and companies and brands, being curious keeps us on edge, and it keeps us driven for our purpose when we're curious about something. When we lack that curiosity, we start to fall in complacency. We start to get comfortable. We start to get relaxed. So I noticed that, number 1. Number 2, I noticed that when you do explore, it's just so much fun. because you don't know what's going to happen. So it forced me to figure out how to navigate, how to be flexible, how to adjust, how to read things that may be harmful or unsafe. And so I think those two things really come back. And of course, you know, keeping your word was probably the third piece as a kid, just seeing that. But some of those figures for sure. And then there were some sports figures that we all could probably point to.
Is Jordan one of them?
Jordan was one from the fact of just how much his work ethic was, but more when I peel back the layers now and look at and listen to what Kobe has done and hear about some of what he would do, I'm like, dang, it's the same work ethic there. But then when I think about, you know, like say a Muhammad Ali, I'm just like, they zoned in, they knew what their purpose was, they accepted it, didn't fight it, and decided to go all in on it and be the best that they could be.
One of the things that stands out to me, just kind of connecting the dots with what you do today, hosting a show, being a speaker, you mentioned Oprah, you mentioned Donahue, some of these folks that you looked up to that were talk show hosts. At what point did you say, I want to be on TV?
You know, I've always, this is a great question. At an early age, I was intrigued by radio and television. So at first I thought I was this techie guy that was going to be into like fixing or making these things. But more and more I realized, no, I actually want to be on the camera, not behind the camera. And I think when it really hit me was probably the first job that I had. I was actually selling ads for a cable network. Actually, it was for a cable system. So each cable system across the country had their own reach and their own demographic. And so in Baltimore City, there was a cable system there. It was called United Artists Cable. We had like 13 stations. I mean, you had like, this is like ESPN, TNT, this is like the basics, CNN, Lifetime, like none of these other channels didn't exist, Bravo, none of that stuff was even a thought at that time. And my job was to go out and try to convince small businesses how they could get additional exposure by creating a commercial for them to be on TV. What I found out was I liked selling that, but I loved how TV commercials were being made. And then I said, well, how do I just do this for myself? So the real story is I did my first talk show when I was an employee at this company.
Got it.
Leveraged those resources to feel out what this was and what this could be. And that's when I got the bug, like, oh, I can actually do this.
So let me get this straight, though. You didn't go to like broadcast journalism school to do what you do. Is that correct?
This is so correct. Like, I am a college dropout. You know, shout out to my parents who really pushed.
Shout out to the mom and dad.
Yeah, I mean,
like shout out to my mom and dad. Shout out to Mario's mom and dad.
Super supportive.
We would not be here in Times Square from Miami and Baltimore if it wasn't for our upbringing.
I mean, you were telling me off camera 10 years ago to the day you were basically broke.
10 years ago today, I lost my job.
You lost your job in the financial industry, in the banking industry.
Working for AIG.
Yeah, I mean, and you're
headquartered right here in New York City.
And you are in the mecca of stocks, trades, financial, NASDAQ. 10 years to the day.
Right.
And I know what that feels like because we went broke. My wife and I, pursuing our dream, went broke, really pursuing it. And, you know, we're still dealing with, like, wow, I can't believe how much debt we went, like, we really did that. We really thought that we were going to make this dream happen, that we were willing to go into that much debt.
What was the dream, though?
You know, Nicole came to me early on. She saw me doing an interview with Stedman Graham.
Okay.
And this was back in Baltimore, and this was a few years after I kind of had this bug that I was like, I can do this. And Stedman said something that caught her attention. Stedman goes, you have something special about you, and I don't know what it is, but you need to keep doing this thing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And at the time, that was everything. Like, I wasn't even like, hey, man, do you think you could talk to Oprah for me? Like, I should have been thinking like that. But for him to say it, I was just being so respectful to him for saying that I was just sitting in that and just grateful that he said that. Well, that triggered Nicole to say, this is what I know what to do with the brand.
Okay.
This is who you are. Let me work on the economic models. Let me figure out the business behind this. Let's build this together. You deal with the marketing and the vision and the content, and I'll deal with the back office, the front office, and the legal and the contracts and the employees and the hiring, like everything else it takes to really.
So let me get this straight. Nicole's your wife.
That's right.
So you're a team. You're a team.
Like CEO, CFO, and there's probably one other
in business and in love. So that's great. So no, but that's sexy because like I'm a big fan of the process.
Yes.
I love the details and I love the process. Like so many people nowadays are talking about their successes and like we could sit here for 30 minutes and talk about how you got an Emmy and we're gonna get to that.
Right.
But
that's
like
not what's really important.
No, like I'm a fan of the process because you hear about Bill Gates and Zuckerberg, and like you're always seeing a number associated with that person's name, what they did, what they've accomplished.
Right.
I want to know how they got there.
Yep.
Because for someone like you and I that didn't necessarily go like the traditional
path,
route to go to college, like you
right.
need to meet people that are going to educate you. Like my next question I was getting ready to ask you, because I know people ask me this as well, is like you look the part, you sound the part, like you have that voice.
Yeah.
You've got like that it,
Yeah.
even though you didn't go to broadcast journalism school.
No, this is true. It's
like,
all self-taught.
How do you get that out of you?
Yeah, I think so. Again, goes back to curiosity, number one. Number two, belief, like having a real internal belief system about what it is you think you can accomplish. And then you have to put in the work. Like what people don't know, you talk about the process. So what I had to do while I had a full-time job, I decided to call a radio station, an AM radio station, said, I want to host a talk show. In fact, I saw an ad, and I said, I would like to host a talk show. I go to the station, they tell me it's going to cost money for me to have a half hour. I said, how much? They tell me, I think it was $1,300 at the time or something. I said, let me go find sponsors and I'll be back. Got a sponsor, came back. While I'm working a full-time job, I have a weekly talk show that's on a small AM radio station that you can't hear that far at all, to the point where I was leaving at 12 noon on my day job to drive 20 minutes to the station, do the show for a half hour, and come back to work late. Like I was getting back at work at like 1:15, 1:20, eating lunch in the car. And so I never thought that they would actually hear me on the air, by the way. But my boss was like, why are you always late on Thursday? So I had to tell her.
Right.
But that was the hustle.
Right.
That was how I had to do it at the time. And then you start saying, well, okay, well, this is working. How do I get to a bigger audience and a bigger audience and a bigger audience? But it took years to actually get to this point. And I wanted to be on TV early, but radio was happening for me quicker. And it was frustrating. So when you think about the process, people don't talk about this type of stuff of, well, how did you deal with the frustration of what you wanted to do, but what was actually pulling you? And so radio was pulling me, so I accepted it. And then I decided to own it and dive into it. Well, lo and behold, as I got more and more in radio, I was then able to then cold call, did the same process with a TV station. I'd like to come in every Thursday, do a morning segment on this content that I do on radio. And they were like, okay, this sounds like a good idea. Let's try it out. Tried it out, did it for 2 years at no pay.
Which I want to interject and say that, because people ask me, like I'm sure they ask you, how do you record a show? How do you get onto Inc. or Entrepreneur or any of these publications? And I tell them, bring them content. Bring them, like the biggest challenge that brands and like even media publishers have is like they need those fresh voices. They need a different perspective. They need the content. Like they've got their like corporate buttoned up host on set. But then guys like you and I come and like we go against the grain because we're coming from a different angle.
That's true. And it's all about knowing what your perspective is. So the first thing I would say is don't try to be something you're not. It's very easy to fall into this comparison cycle. It's very easy to say, maybe I should do something. It's nothing wrong with studying other models, but when you start comparing yourself to compete with someone else, that's when it starts to become bad motive and bad intent. And so I think being true to you. So number one, assessing who you are is important. Number two, building up the bio. You have to put in the work and build the portfolio. Now here's the thing that a lot of people miss. They don't capture the moments of when they're building their portfolio. So you have to have your cousin, your sister, someone shooting with a phone.
Instagram stories. Man. For me, it was Snapchat stories. Like I jumped on Snapchat when it was hot, like scorching hot. 2015, 2016, like, and that was it. It was just, every single day I was going on there and I was vlogging on Snapchat. And the more I did that, what happened is I felt comfortable with hearing my voice. I started owning that small screen. And I felt just comfortable with speaking. Like you'd be surprised how much better of a speaker being on Snapchat made me. Like what you hear now,
I believe it though,
wasn't the same pre-Snapchat. Snapchat helped me get over it, and then live stream came over. And like, I want to hear your thoughts on live streaming because I don't do a lot of live streaming. For many reasons, like, you know, one, you're live. There is no retakes. Oh, I messed up. I'm gonna do this over again. But I think for me, what happens is the numbers. Like when you're looking at a live stream, and you're just doing, you know, the classic Periscope, Twitter Live, Facebook Live, Instagram Stories Live. Like there's so many lives.
There are.
You're looking at other factors that kind of take you off your game. You're looking at people jumping in. You're looking at them tapping hearts. You're looking at comments. I find it to be very distracting, which kind of takes you like off character. Almost. At what point did you say, I'm going to take this live stream revolution and I'm going to flip it upside down and I'm going to be the first TV style host to do a show and more importantly, get that show an Emmy?
Because it was three things that I think really at the end of the day that I thought were important. Number one is there was too much programming happening at people and not happening with people. So how do you make a show feel crowd produced? How do you bring the crowd into the production process? A lot of shows will say, email us what you think we should talk about. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. You never know. It goes into this email ether and you don't know if they read it. We were flat open even with our production process. So from the beginning, we said, we want you, the viewers, to help us pick topics, tell us the questions you want answered, what types of guests you would like on this show. Here's the overall structure. Here's the theme. It's about never settling. It's about not giving up on your passion, pursuing your goals, living a life that's fulfilled, not unfulfilled. But who do you want to see? What do you want to ask them? And what are the topics that are most relevant? And then we would use the technology tools. We would use voting polls so that people could actually see, like, oh, wow, people really do want to know how to leave their day job effectively to go and pursue their side hustle. That wasn't something that a team of 8 of us came up with in an editorial room. That was 400 of us all like tallying up and talking about it. So I think that was the first thing, not really seeing programming respect the audience enough to hear their opinion. And so I think that was number one. And I said, live, this will help us with that. Number two, how do you then do the show and enable them to help steer it? So how can we even have them be involved in what would you like us to do next? We would have the control room literally ready with 4 different outcomes. This control room, right, this great team that's right here, they would have 4 different outcomes because they didn't know what the people were going to choose. And they had to be ready. This is something you don't do in traditional television or you're afraid to do in live TV. So I knew that that was an advantage. And then I felt that the third piece was allowing them to get the questions that they wanted answered. So I'm more of a moderator and a coach in the sense that it's not about me and the big name, it's the Never Settle show with Mario. It's like, it's not Mario's show, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's different. It's not just, Carlos' show, it's real talk.
Right.
So you have a different motive and a different reason for why you're doing this. So I think those 3 things said, live. We have to be live. We have to allow people to be a part of the process, and we need to allow our guests to be a part of that live energy with an in-studio audience and an online audience to be able to have a conversation that's two-way.
What was the inspiration, though, behind doing Never Settle? Would you say you thought about a place in your life where you once were, like you mentioned before?
Yeah.
You and your wife are trying to grow a business. You're investing your money into it. You hit rock bottom during the recession, like many of us did. Was that the inspiration for you?
No, because at that time we were, you know how rough it is. You're trying to, we're literally trying to find change in the sofas.
To keep the lights on.
And I'm putting it in Coinstar machines to get gas money. Yeah. Like it was that real. Her mom was buying us groceries. My mother and my family were watching our kids so that we could try to make the hustle happen so that we wouldn't have to pay for a babysitter and all these things. So it was really, my godmother was paying for train tickets for me to get to New York because I had these great opportunities and had no way to get to them. So it was really rough in that sense of trying to navigate through that. But I think that ultimately, I think that, I kind of lost train of thought, man. I got so much into my godmother and my family. And
it was just like, what, like my question was.
No, so you really took me back.
My question just was, you do this amazing show. You do it right here in the studio. You were explaining before that you fit like 40 to 70 people sitting right here where we're sitting right in front of you.
Yeah.
And you do this amazing production. But what inside of Mario Armstrong said, I'm going to do this show.
And call it the Never Settle.
And it's not about Mario Armstrong, like you said, but it's about bringing some hope and motivation, inspiration.
Because, so I think, Nicole really gets, the most of the credit for this because she was the one that was like, you're the next gen, you are supposed to be one of the people that carries up this next generation. The Oprahs of the world and all of them had they're kind of moved on into different areas and talk wasn't really the same and reality had now come into play. And so there was a lot of negativity and conflict and programming that seemed to really look at, the worst side of people as opposed to the better side of people. And she said, this is the time. So then I did this tweet and at the end I tagged it, #NeverSettle. And Twitter went nuts. Like my feedback on my timeline went nuts. They were like, yeah, never. They didn't even know what I was talking about. They were like, yeah, never settle, never settle. And then I just said, Nicole, you know, it's going crazy. This thing will never settle. Next thing you know, we ended up creating the summer club that was called the Never Settle Club. It was a 2-week or 4-week program that we did for free. Where we were, this is before we even knew like you should be charging for courses. Like we were making courses and delivering it for free, and then we had like a sponsor like AT&T, and we called this thing the Never Settle Club. Okay. And so many people just came to it, and then we realized like, okay, we need to take this energy that's happening in the club, because Mario's advice is working, the collaborative community is working, people are bringing each other up and they're helping, they're finding business partners because of people that are now on a similar mission that they never knew each other before, and so that's when we said, that's the show. It's the Never Settle show. We're gonna help teach people how to never settle in as many facets of life.
So let's go deeper with the process. Okay. Going back to the process, you have a lot of content creators that are doing shows from their home.
Yeah.
Does that creator need to evolve into having studio access in order to kind of break through that glass ceiling?
It's so tough. This is a really great question, because that was our approach. Our approach was, let's try to push the production quality to the highest end possible. What we knew was that it was going to be expensive. We just didn't realize like maybe how expensive it will have to be consistently. And even still, we're nowhere near what traditional TV budgets do. So we knew that we still had a competitive advantage, that we can be cheaper than how TV does it and have a broader impact because we can go international, not just be, you know, in the US. But I think for creators, I think the first thing you have to think of is, what is the purpose of why you're doing it anyway? Like, you have to be unequivocally certain about what that is, because if I get pulled into a different direction, but it's going to fit the Never Settle impact, I'm going to allow that to pull me. I'm not going to fight it.
Right.
Whereas traditionally you want to fight it because you have a particular vision and a particular thing you want to do, and then you're not open to what could be a better opportunity for you, if it's still delivering the impact or the why that you want to deliver. So I think that's number one. Number two, even if it's in your home, doesn't matter. Just make sure the production quality is great. I think more people should be doing better quality from their home. Really look at the lighting. Really think about mics and sound. Sound is so critical, but really think about what's behind me. What are those shadows? Like, really pay attention to
the aesthetics.
The
aesthetics are really important.
It's critical. And then being able to communicate effectively on that platform is the most important thing. So I think if you feel like you have the it factor and you feel like this is too small, I'm in my house and this is great and I tested this and this feels like a great test, I'm ready for bigger, I think you'll know. I think you either kind of know that as a creator that I want to do more, or you feel like this is great, I'm loving doing this and I want to make this more special.
I will say this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. I used to create a lot of content on Snapchat. A lot of it would be, you know, on the fly. I'd be at home. As soon as you come in this environment, it changes the whole dynamic.
You feel it, don't you?
You feel it. Like, you're not as loose. It takes a while to kind of start developing that voice. Before I started doing the NASDAQ studio here in Times Square, I did about 30 episodes of Real Talk in San Francisco at the Entrepreneurial Center. And it was a much smaller space. It would just be me and one other person, or a lot of the segments was just myself. And it was a different vibe altogether. Like right now, like you guys watching this can't see this, but we're seeing people walk back and forth.
In Times Square?
In Times Square, people poking their head and looking at us from outside. So like, I think that a part of it is you have to think of the message of what's coming out of your mouth needs to move people. It needs to be powerful.
It does. It has to be
the aesthetics are, don't get me wrong, the visual aesthetics.
No, but content's everything.
Matter.
Like you said, you started with story.
But like, you have to hit people's heart.
It's true.
In order for you to now build that critical mass. So my next question to you is, how important are the views? And be real with me on this one.
I mean, look, man, this, you know, I teach through transparency. So to the chagrin of maybe some of my family members and maybe even some of my team, I go all in on being transparent, because I think if I had other people that could have been more open to sharing, we would all be better off. If we all could be a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more open, or understand that the pie is bigger than what we think it is, we would all be a little bit better off. And so my straight up answer to you is that this industry of making content and getting that content funded due to the eyeballs or the views that you get, is very, very convoluted. There's too many different things that are happening that are causing mass confusion. Number one, the amount of views that you get on something does not necessarily mean that they're actually watching it. If you look at Facebook, that's what, 4 seconds? YouTube is 30 seconds, right? So right off the bat, you don't even really know how many people are actually watching, but everybody wants to know your view number. And it's like, when you get past this vanity of view numbers and really look at what people are producing. And so if there's one thing I would really say to brands is, and this isn't a cry like, oh, he just doesn't have, we had 500,000 views per episode. Like over 10 episodes, we had, 4.8 million views to this thing. That's not the problem. The problem is I want the best quality views possible. And so do you as a brand or as a company or as a creator.
And more importantly, how good does it feel when someone sends you a direct message and says, Mario, you just changed my life?
Amazing. You can't, let me tell you, I will never get tired of that. I remember walking down the street one time with Al Roker, and Al, and this is me early on, kind of like just getting into the Today Show, and I was walking down the street and they were screaming at him, called his name, he went over, took a picture, or did whatever he did, and he came back over, and I was just like, man, how do you deal with that all the time? He's like, if I ever get tired of this, I know it's time to leave. And it's true. He's grateful. What he's saying is, I am so grateful that other people see something in me and I move people in some way that they want to take the time out to let me know that. So I feel like when people do take the time out to let me know that, it stops me. I really take that in because that's what we're trying to do. And no matter if it's 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 or 1,000,000, sure, you want to grow. And look, the idea is everybody wants to have big numbers. I want them too.
Right.
Like, that's real talk.
No, that is real talk.
Real talk. But real talk also is, hey, brands, look at my engagement. Hey, brands, look at Carlos's engagement. Hey, brands, look at the next creator's engagement.
I'll kind of add
one.
Another layer deeper. Again, going back to the process. When you create content, yes, it lives on Facebook or it lives on YouTube. That doesn't mean it has to be contained within those mediums.
No, it doesn't.
So, I'll share with you. We're here on Real Talk. There's brands that I'll go to, and I'll say, look, you offer programming through. If it's an airline, you have in-flight programming.
Right.
If it's a mobile app, you have programming throughout your app. You're able to reach X number of people, but what you lack is content to keep people coming back. So. There's a perfect marriage. You have distribution access, I bring you content, it's a good marriage. So I try to get creators to think outside of being contained in a Facebook box or a YouTube box. And I'm glad that we're having this discussion. We just had Carrie Flynn of Digiday on the previous segment, and we spent time talking about how Facebook is evolving. Quite frankly, between you and I feel like Facebook is almost working against the creator instead of for the creator.
I'm not going to say no to that. I'm going to say that I feel the same way. I feel that, these platforms at a large level have a big task ahead of them. I get that. They have to try to place their bets as smart as they can place them. I will say this, when a lot of bets are being placed, some of them don't seem to make sense, and you're kind of like what's happening here? And then when certain bets are being placed, you're like, oh, well, that's expected. Okay, so now we're going to just do heroes. We're going to do hero shows or hero formats where you're going to find a big name that already has a large audience, either on your platform or somewhere else, and the intent is to just use them, leverage their personality to get distribution, as opposed to, is this content actually something that we don't have that's applicable to our audience that they would come back for? So I think that's where the creator starts to get hurt. And then we start getting into numbers again. And then we get into vanity metrics. And then people want to buy followers and all of this stuff. So I think that if you get back to, for bigger platforms, they're missing people like you and I. They are literally missing the next set of creators that are going to do it with or without them. Honestly.
I often think this, if Facebook and YouTube right now did a creator camp, and you take the different verticals, so you have folks that do lifestyle content, you have bloggers that are into sports, you have folks that are more into news and current events like you and I,
VR,
talk shows,
short films.
You take the different verticals and you do a creator camp and you're training these creators. I think YouTube and Facebook could now start scouting talent and sign talent on the spot. Talent can be coached and developed. You know this, coming from the business. They can be scouted and coached. You put them on a set, you can model people but you also got to support them with driving the views to their
true.
content.
This
like
is what a
Facebook
network
and YouTube
does.
are a network.
That's right, and that's what networks do. When you talk about the TV, so the beauty of our company is that I'm in different worlds. I'm in the TV side, and I'm also in the digital side. And on the TV side, they understand that. They understand that you can actually take a chance. You can do 3 episodes or 6 episodes. You can have a pilot season and try something out and promote it and really get behind it. That's not happening in the digital space to the same degree. It happens when you see Netflix and Hulu, but it doesn't happen when it starts coming down to YouTube and Facebook, at least not yet. I mean, they've done some great shows, don't get me wrong, but I just feel that if you really want to take it to the next level, you need to invest in creators that have that factor, that have already proven their ability to bring it. Because you can try to take someone with millions of views and try to transform and mold them, and it won't work. Or you can take someone that seemingly has lower views but has high engagement, and you give them the opportunity, that will work.
The way I see it is like if you take someone that's already hit that glass ceiling and they've got the million views, they did that most likely organically, just being themselves.
True.
This second Big Blue starts to step in
Yeah.
and model that person to be a
Right,
little
right.
bit more corporate.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden they're not going to resonate with the audience, which is where the micro influencer comes in. Now, on the next segment, we're going to bring Carrie back on. We're going to go ahead and get more of your thoughts on hers on where this is all headed. But I've got to ask you, what is next for Mario Armstrong?
So to your point, you know, when we look at our roadmap and we look at our company and our business model, we have about 6 different divisions. This is only one. Never Settle Show is just one division of the company. So there's everything on there from events that we're going to be doing, launching a conference and a Never Settle Summit. There are courses and educational materials and the things that we're doing for kids in terms of camps. But the biggest thing for us ultimately is to create the Never Settle Network. So we're going to create our own OTT is really the opportunity.
Is that the exclusive? Are you dropping that news here on Real Talk?
I kind of did just drop that. I kind of did on Real Talk because I want to be real with creators in that you do need to, going back to your earlier question, it's important to leverage the platforms if they're willing to work with you and if it can work and if it can help you. Once you realize that you have something that's working and it's been validated by your peers or by viewers or by industry, then it's time for you to really consider what are you going to do about your content to take it to the next level, and how can you ultimately own that ecosystem so that you can give it the purity that you want to give it without having it be tainted in any way with your vision or your dream.
The Never Settle Network.
Going to aggregate
It's
all
gonna
types
happen.
of inspiring,
It's gonna
motivation.
change the world, I feel it.
Yeah, man, because we're going to be doing creator camps.
Absolutely.
Because we're going to be looking for people that are inspiring in health and in wellness and in sports and in cooking. So if you're a chef that is great, but you don't have the access, but you're great and you're inspiring and you're making food that's gluten-free, dairy-free, and vegan, like that's Never Settle philosophy, because we want you to feel good and eat well. So these are the people that we're going to start scouting to bring them onto the Never Settle Network to aggregate positive and inspiring programming.
Mario, before we wrap up, where can the viewers out there learn more about you? Where can they connect with you? Like, where can they consume all your goodness?
I would say 2 things. One would be Instagram. I love doing a lot of stuff on Instagram, so at Mario Armstrong on Instagram. The second one would be, we just launched a new podcast. Wake Up and Level Up is the name of the podcast, a 5-minute or less daily motivational morning podcast. I just interviewed you for it real quick. And so we would love people to go and subscribe to Wake Up and Level Up podcast, or just go to neversettle.tv.
Like, once again, podcasting, using platforms like Anchor,
Yeah.
there's so many ways that you can go outside of the box.
This is true.
And just jump into the media game.
Yeah, and this is why I say stop looking for the money. Stop looking for the funding from people. Look to create what you need to create, and then get creative about sources. Get that from your friends and family. Do Patreon, do crowdfunding. Go to a local store that you buy clothing from or fashion from or whatever you're thinking, your food from if you're a chef. Where do you shop already that's connected to what you do? I don't care if it's camera gear. What do you shop already? Talk to them about what you're making and see if they'll be willing to help fund what you're trying to do.
And more importantly, never settle for mediocrity.
Never, ever settle for me.
My man, so good to have you on the set, Mario Armstrong.
Likewise,
the
Carlo.
Emmy award-winning Mario Armstrong. That is Never Settle Show. Thank you so much for watching this segment. Stay tuned. We're going to bring Carrie Flynn of Digiday back on the set for the Real Talk Roundup. Welcome back to Real Talk. This is the Real Talk Roundup. Joining me back on the set is Carrie Flynn of Digiday and Mario Armstrong. Let's jump right into it.
Okay.
We've spent the last hour talking with you, Mario, about your show,
Yeah.
Never Settle Show. Carrie, all the trends happening in the world of Facebook Watch, Twitter. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mario.
Okay.
We're at this intersection right now where creators are being constrained by the confines of the platform.
It's true.
Hey, should we be thinking about going outside of the YouTube, Facebook space and maybe privatizing our content through a platform like Vimeo?
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, the answer is yes. Too many people are relying on the platforms in order to determine their level of success. And when you do that, you're only as good as what the platform can do for you and whether or not they're going to actually support you in the way you need to be supported. The bottom line is you're a creator. You want to make your content, so your goal is to get it out there to the audiences that you want to impact. You have to find other ways outside of the existing platforms or outside of those constraints, like go into a Vimeo, charging people per rate to watch it because they'll give to you. They'll have a higher quality of people that'll be viewing your programming as opposed to maybe someone seeing it for 30 seconds or in Facebook's case, 4 seconds.
And what are your thoughts, Carrie? Do you foresee social networks are going to crack down if we're still using social media to promote our premium content on a private channel?
Well, I mean, I think an easy example of that is we've seen Facebook always crack down when people use the word Snapchat in their posts. Like, it's a rumor that's true, right? So yes, they like hate when you say other platforms, right? But I think there's a lot of power to what Mario just said. I think Facebook sees it. I know in VidCon this past year, they were talking to creators about Patreon and this idea of getting direct payments from your viewers. Yep. And I believe they're going to start testing next year that when you have a Facebook page or a Facebook group, that you can charge for access to content. It's limiting. So to Mario's point, Facebook, the giant, sees this happening. So does YouTube, right? Yeah. They have YouTube Red, where people have to pay for access. It's essentially limited to that. So yes.
So kind of staying on this though, Mario is an Emmy award-winning creator, which lifts your stock up exponentially. Yeah. So are creators like Mario a friend or a foe to the social networks that might want a piece of that success?
Ooh.
What are your thoughts? I know
Mario wants to answer this.
Just ask that. Let's start with you, Carrie.
Well, I think what's interesting is some platforms, and just like anything in life, they want to see success, right? Like to the point we talked about earlier that I used to talk to a lot of people who started, they were like Facebook first creators, right? Like while YouTube has their stars and Snapchat has some people are like, we're Facebook stars, right? So if Facebook could be like, well, Mario may be Emmy award winning, well, he also posts on Facebook, right? And we can kind of like take some of that credibility. We're like, and maybe like grow other people to be like, you should probably pay attention to Facebook because look what happened with Mario.
So, and you bring up a great point. The point is the platforms have to pay attention. The platforms actually have to see the creators that are doing great work, that are being rewarded, and then say, hey, this is awesome. How are you doing this? Because we aren't funding you. So how are you independently getting this done to the level where other people that are peers are recognizing it at the highest level of giving it an award? And when those, I think when the platforms start recognizing, you don't necessarily have to be Jada Pinkett Smith, no shot at her, that's Red Table Talk. She's got instant distribution, instant credibility, and a great show. But when you're someone that's not maybe as well known as that, or someone that is completely independent and not being paid by the network to do your programming, and you do get to that level of success, that to me is a signal that other independent creators can do the same thing, and platforms should be embracing those creators that are doing that.
Interesting. Last question, and perhaps we can answer this in the next 30 seconds or less. Will Facebook, staying on that line, will Facebook at one point start knocking on the doors of creators and charge you to create the content that you create?
Oh, I don't see that one, Carlos. I mean, they got charge me to create the content?
Right, to use their platform.
I mean, look, now you're talking about like syndication. If you were to take that into the terrestrial world or in the TV world, you're talking about syndication deals, you're talking about mass market. In order to do those types of deals, there's a lot of other things that need to come to the table for a creator to do that. Because once you start charging the creator to access the audience, there's a level of guarantee that is expected, as well as promotional guarantee that would be done by that platform. So there's a lot of give and take that would have to happen from both parties in order to see that.
Okay, so that's a maybe. Carrie?
Yeah, the contracts sound really complicated, right? I think one thing that we've seen is maybe less creators, but from the publishers and the Hollywood studios, Facebook does have deals, right? Where like they are paying a budget for this content. So they're making it happen. But in terms of the reverse of I'm going to give you money, I think they're going to be like, all right, well, so you're going to put free ads on your newsfeed. You're going to blast it out. I'll be the prime spot, right? Like if they're coming for that, I think it would be very complicated for them and probably not what they want to handle. No, they have a lot of other problems going on.
As they say in show business, stay tuned.
Yep.
Right?
It's true.
Thank you so much for watching another episode of Real Talk here on Facebook Watch. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to give it a thumbs up, like, comment, share. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much, Carrie and Mario.
Thanks, Carlos.
Thank you.
See you in the next episode. Stay tuned.